There is a quiet gap that ruins more lives than failure ever could. The gap between what you know you're capable of and how you actually live. You feel it when you're alone, when the noise fades, when there's nothing left to distract you from the truth. You know you could be sharper, more disciplined, more consistent, but somehow days pass. Weeks pass, and nothing really changes. This audiobook is not here to inspire you. Inspiration fades. What you need is something more durable. You need standards. Because ambition without standards creates frustration, and frustration, left unchecked, turns into self-doubt. Thinking big is easy. Living up to that thinking is not. Anyone can imagine a different life. More freedom, more control, more respect. But very few people are willing to accept what that kind of life demands from them, quietly, daily, and without applause. That's where the gap begins. People don't fail because their goals are unrealistic. They fail because their habits stay small while their expectations grow large. They want results without pressure, progress without discomfort, confidence without discipline. And when reality pushes back, they don't raise their standards, they lower their goals. This audiobook is for those who are done with that pattern. If you've ever felt stuck between who you are and who you know you should be. If you've ever started strong only to lose momentum when things got boring or uncomfortable. If you've ever questioned your own consistency more than your potential, then you're in the right place. Over the next 60 minutes, we're not chasing motivation. We're building something quieter and far more powerful. A way of thinking that doesn't collapse under pressure. A way of acting that doesn't depend on mood. A standard that holds even when no one is watching. This audiobook is built around one core principle. Think bigger. Act relentlessly. Win anyway. Not when it feels good. Not when it feels clear. Not when you feel supported. Anyway. Because winning is not about intensity. It's about endurance. It's not about how motivated you feel today. It's about what you're willing to do on the days you feel nothing at all. As you listen, you may notice something different. There's no shouting here, no dramatic promises, no emotional manipulation. Just calm, direct truths. The kind that don't excite you in the moment, but stay with you long after. The kind that force you to look at your routines, your excuses, and your standards without looking away. We'll talk about responsibility, about discipline built in private, about acting without emotional reward, about staying calm when pressure rises, and about committing longer than your doubt wants you to. This is not about becoming someone new overnight. It's about removing what has been weakening you for years. Because the real obstacle has never been the world. It's been inconsistency, comfort, and the habit of negotiating with yourself. At certain moments, you may feel resistance. That's a signal, not a problem. Growth doesn't always feel empowering. Sometimes it feels exposing, like you're being asked to let go of versions of yourself that once felt safe. But that discomfort is the entry price to anything meaningful. So don't listen to this audiobook casually. Don't let it fade into background noise. Listen like someone who's done wasting time. Like someone who understands that no one is coming to save them. Like someone who's ready to live by standards instead of moods. By the end of this audiobook, you won't be handed a fantasy. You'll be given a framework, a way to think, a way to act. A way to stay steady when things get difficult. And from that steadiness, real power is built. If this message resonates with you, if it feels like something you needed to hear, share this video with one person you know who's struggling, doubting themselves, or quietly falling short of their potential. Sometimes, the right words at the right time can change the direction of a life. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Thinking big is a responsibility. This chapter is not about dreaming bigger. It's about understanding the responsibility that comes with thinking big. Thinking big is often described as something exciting, a breakthrough moment, a vision of a better future. But that description hides the truth. Thinking big is not an emotional high. It is a long-term obligation. The moment you decide you want more from life, more control, more freedom, more impact, you silently agree to live differently. Not later, not gradually, immediately. Because once you think bigger, your standards can no longer stay the same. Most people associate big thinking with possibility. What they rarely talk about is pressure. Thinking big doesn't give you permission to relax. It removes your permission to be careless. Small thinking allows flexibility. You can waste time and recover. You can be inconsistent without consequences. You can tell yourself tomorrow will fix what today avoided. Big thinking takes that comfort away. Once you see what you're capable of, every action below that level starts to feel heavy, not dramatic, just uncomfortable. There is a quiet weight that comes from knowing you could act with more discipline, but choosing not to. That weight doesn't motivate most people. It drains them. I once spoke to someone who said they wanted a bigger life, more meaning, more independence, more direction. But nothing in their daily routine changed. Late nights stayed late. Mornings stayed rushed. Work stayed unfinished. They weren't lacking ambition. They were avoiding the responsibility that ambition demands. Because thinking big doesn't tolerate excuses. It exposes them. And the moment your excuses stop working, you're faced with a question most people avoid. If this truly matters, why don't my actions show it? That question creates discomfort, and discomfort is where many people quietly retreat back to smaller goals. Big ideas rarely die because they are impossible. They die because they demand change too early. The most dangerous moment is not the beginning. It's the moment responsibility replaces excitement. At that point, thinking big begins to interfere with comfort. You say no more often. You become selective with your time. You stop explaining yourself, and that shift creates friction. I watched someone go through this quietly. No announcements, no dramatic lifestyle changes. They simply became more deliberate. Earlier mornings, quieter focus, and less tolerance for distraction. Nothing extreme, but reactions came anyway. You've changed. You're too serious now. You need to relax. They hadn't become cold. They had raised their standards, and that's when doubt appeared. Not doubt about the goal, but doubt about whether standing alone was worth it. Most people don't quit because the work is unbearable. They quit because they don't want to feel isolated while doing it. So they soften the vision. They tell themselves they were aiming too high. They trade potential for comfort and call it balance. Thinking big creates a temporary gap between who you are and who you're becoming. That gap feels awkward, exposed, and unless you understand that this feeling is normal, you'll mistake it for a warning sign. It isn't. It's the cost of change. There is a shift that separates people who talk about big goals from people who build them. It's the shift from desire to requirement. Weak thinking asks, "What do I want?" Strong thinking asks, "What does this demand of me?" Big outcomes don't respond to motivation. They respond to standards. Two people can want the same result. Only one will accept the daily requirements attached to it. I once observed this difference play out quietly. Two individuals. Similar goals, similar starting points. One waited for the right mood. The other adjusted their life around the goal. Sleep, schedule, inputs. No speeches, no declarations. Months later, the difference was undeniable. Not because one was more talented, but because one treated the goal like a contract, not a wish. That is what thinking big truly is. A contract. Once you sign it, your old habits stop being neutral. They become either aligned or liabilities. This doesn't make life rigid. It makes it intentional. You stop asking how you feel about the work. You ask whether the work needs to be done. That single shift changes everything. Standards don't negotiate. They don't wait for confidence. They don't respond to excuses. They only require consistency, and consistency, applied long enough, reshapes identity. Thinking big doesn't begin with confidence. It begins with honesty. Honesty about what your vision costs, and honesty about whether you're willing to pay it. Because once you see the price clearly, one truth becomes unavoidable. The version of you that exists today may not be strong enough to carry what you want next. That realization is not meant to discourage you. It's meant to prepare you. Growth doesn't begin by adding more ambition. It begins by letting go of what no longer fits. Chapter 2. Kill the small version of you. There comes a point where progress stops feeling like growth and starts feeling like loss. Not because you're moving backward, but because you're being asked to let go of a version of yourself that once felt familiar. This is where most people hesitate. They say they want change. They say they want more. But they underestimate what real change requires. Because growth is not only about building something new, it's about ending something old. The uncomfortable truth is this: you cannot carry a bigger future with a smaller identity. The habits that once protected you will eventually limit you. The mindset that once kept you safe will eventually keep you average. And unless you're willing to confront that reality, you'll stay stuck, no matter how clear your goals are. The small version of you is not evil. It's cautious. It avoids risk. It prefers comfort over uncertainty. It keeps you busy instead of focused, occupied instead of disciplined. This version doesn't fail loudly. It fails quietly, through hesitation, through overthinking, through waiting for the right time. And the most dangerous part is that it feels reasonable. You tell yourself you're being patient. You tell yourself you're being realistic. You tell yourself you're just not ready yet. But readiness never arrives on its own. I once watched someone talk for years about changing their life. They read books, they watched videos, they planned endlessly. But every decision still went through the same filter. Does this feel safe? As long as that filter stayed in place, nothing changed. Because the small version of you is not lazy, it's protective. It wants to avoid embarrassment, avoid discomfort, avoid standing out. And as long as it's in control, growth stays theoretical. Killing the small version of you doesn't mean becoming reckless. It means becoming decisive. It means recognizing that comfort has a cost, and that cost is momentum. The moment you choose growth, something has to be sacrificed, and it's rarely something dramatic. It's usually subtle. Sleeping a little less comfortably, spending time alone instead of being entertained, doing work without immediate validation. These are small deaths, but they accumulate. Most people don't fail because they can't do the work. They fail because they refuse to let go of the identity that avoids it. The small version of you negotiates constantly. Just today, just this once, just until things calm down. But life doesn't calm down, and neither does opportunity. There is a quiet moment, often unnoticed, where you realize you're choosing familiarity over progress. That moment repeats itself daily, and each time you avoid it, the small version of you grows stronger. I've seen people sabotage themselves not through weakness, but through loyalty to who they used to be. They protect old habits because those habits once helped them survive. But survival is not the same as growth. What once kept you comfortable will not take you forward. The hard truth is that your future does not need your permission to arrive, but it does require your preparation. And preparation demands separation. Separation from patterns that no longer serve you, from routines that keep you busy but stagnant, from self-talk that softens accountability. This is where discipline becomes personal. Not discipline as punishment, but discipline as identity. You stop asking, can I get away with this? You start asking, does this align with who I'm becoming? That question changes behavior immediately. The small version of you avoids responsibility. The stronger version accepts it without drama. The small version reacts emotionally. The stronger version responds deliberately. The small version waits for clarity. The stronger version acts and lets clarity catch up. This shift is uncomfortable because it removes excuses, and excuses are emotionally convenient. Once you let go of them, you're left with choice, and choice exposes truth. You either act or you don't. There's no villain here, no external enemy. Just a quiet decision repeated every day. Most people don't need more information. They need fewer compromises. They need to stop protecting the version of themselves that feels safe but goes nowhere. Killing the small version of you doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in silence. When you wake up and do the work without announcing it. When you stop explaining your discipline. When you choose consistency over comfort again and again. This is not about becoming harsh. It's about becoming honest. Honest about the gap between your potential and your behavior. Honest about what you're willing to give up to close that gap. Because something must end for something else to begin. And until you're willing to let go of the version of you that avoids discomfort, your future will remain theoretical. Growth doesn't ask politely. It demands space. And the only way to create that space is to release what no longer fits. Once you do, something shifts. Not externally. Internally. Decisions become simpler. Discipline becomes quieter. Progress becomes inevitable. Not because life gets easier, but because resistance fades. The small version of you survives. The stronger version builds. In the moment you stop protecting the old identity, momentum begins. Chapter 3. Build discipline when no one is watching. There is a version of discipline that looks impressive. Public, visible, applauded. And then there is the only kind that actually changes your life. The one no one sees. Most people think discipline is about intensity, big effort, strong emotion, a moment where everything finally clicks. That moment rarely comes. Real discipline is quiet, boring, repetitive, and that's exactly why it works. When no one is watching, you discover who you really are. Not who you present to the world, but who you answer to when there is no pressure, no praise, and no immediate consequence. That space is where habits are formed. And habits, not intentions, decide outcomes. The problem is not that people don't know what to do. The problem is that they only do it when it feels rewarding. So they work harder when someone is tracking progress. They stay consistent when accountability is external. They show discipline when the cost of failure is visible. But the moment attention disappears, effort drops. That pattern reveals something uncomfortable. They are not disciplined. They are responsive. Responsive to praise. Responsive to urgency. Responsive to fear of judgment. Remove those and behavior collapses. True discipline does not depend on any of that. It operates on standards, not emotions. I once noticed a pattern in people who consistently improved, regardless of environment. They didn't talk about motivation. They didn't dramatize effort. They treated discipline like maintenance, like brushing your teeth, like locking the door, like showing up even when nothing feels urgent. No excitement, no resistance. So just execution. This kind of discipline is invisible because it's not impressive in the moment. But over time, it compounds quietly and aggressively. The hours no one sees matter more than the ones that get attention. The effort you apply without witnesses builds internal trust. And internal trust is powerful. When you repeatedly do what you said you would without anyone reminding you, something shifts. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop needing encouragement. You stop relying on mood. You become predictable to yourself. That predictability is freedom. Because when your behavior is consistent, your mind stops wasting energy on decision-making. There's no debate, no inner argument. You simply do the work. Most people underestimate how much mental noise comes from inconsistency, from promising and not delivering, and from planning and postponing. Each broken promise weakens self-respect, not loudly, quietly. Over time, confidence erodes, not because you failed publicly, but because you failed privately. That erosion is subtle but destructive. Building discipline when no one is watching reverses that process. Every quiet repetition restores credibility with yourself. Not in words, in evidence. You don't feel disciplined, you become disciplined. There's a reason solitude reveals character. Without an audience, there is no performance, only truth. And the truth is this: if you can't hold standards alone, you won't hold them under pressure. Pressure doesn't create discipline, it exposes the lack of it. People often ask how to stay consistent. They look for systems, apps, reminders. Those can help, but they're not the core. The core is identity. You don't act consistently because you're motivated. You act consistently because inconsistency no longer feels like an option. That shift happens when discipline becomes non-negotiable. Not extreme, not obsessive, non-negotiable. You don't ask whether you'll do the work. You only decide when. This is where many people get uncomfortable, because discipline without an audience feels pointless at first. There's no feedback, no recognition, no visible progress, just repetition. That's why most people abandon it early. They confuse lack of stimulation with lack of progress. But progress is often invisible before it becomes obvious. Muscle grows before it shows. Skill develops before it pays. Character forms before it's tested. The work you do alone builds capacity. And capacity determines how much pressure you can handle later. So I've seen people collapse under opportunity, not because they weren't capable, but because they weren't prepared. They had ambition, but no structure, desire, but no discipline. When responsibility arrived, their habits couldn't support it. Discipline built in private prevents that. It trains you to act without emotional reward, to stay steady without validation, to continue without urgency. These are rare skills. And rarity creates advantage. You don't need to be extraordinary. You need to be consistent in ordinary moments. That's where separation happens. While others wait to feel ready, you act. While others rely on pressure, you rely on routine. While others need supervision, you move independently. This isn't about grinding endlessly. It's about eliminating friction. When discipline becomes part of your identity, effort decreases. Not because the work is easier, but because resistance is gone. You no longer fight yourself, and that is the real win. Building discipline when no one is watching is not glamorous, but it creates a foundation that doesn't crack under stress. When pressure comes, and it will, you won't rise to the occasion. You'll fall back on your habits. Make sure they're strong enough, because what you do in silence shapes what you can handle in public. And the strongest people don't announce their discipline. They let the results speak. Chapter 4. Act relentlessly, even when you feel nothing. There will be days when discipline is not difficult, but empty. No resistance, no excitement, no emotion strong enough to push you forward or hold you back. Just silence. These are the days that decide everything. Most people think the hardest days are the painful ones. They're wrong. The most dangerous days are the neutral ones. The days where nothing feels urgent. Nothing feels inspiring. Nothing feels wrong enough to fix. On those days, people drift. They don't quit dramatically. They simply stop pressing forward, because acting without emotion feels pointless to those who are still attached to motivation. But real progress does not wait for feeling. It moves on command. Acting relentlessly does not mean forcing yourself through pain every day. It means removing emotion from the decision to act. You do the work because it's scheduled, because it's required, because it aligns with who you've decided to become, not because it feels meaningful in the moment. I've seen people confuse passion with progress. They wait for energy to return, for clarity to appear, for motivation to come back. While they wait, time moves on. Momentum doesn't disappear suddenly. It fades quietly, one unremarkable day at a time. Relentless action is the antidote to that fade. Not dramatic action, consistent action, the kind that doesn't depend on how the day feels. There is a misconception that acting without emotion leads to burnout. In reality, the opposite is true. Burnout comes from internal conflict, from arguing with yourself every day, from constantly negotiating whether to show up. When action becomes automatic, mental fatigue decreases. You conserve energy by removing debate. This is why routines matter. A routine is not a restriction, it's a release. It frees you from having to decide. I once noticed a pattern in people who continued progressing long after the initial excitement wore off. They didn't push harder, they simplified. They reduced the number of decisions required to act. They created systems that functioned even when motivation was absent. They didn't ask themselves how they felt. They asked what needed to be done next. That shift is subtle, but powerful. Emotion is unreliable. Some days it supports you, other days it betrays you. Relentless action does not fight emotion. It ignores it, not out of suppression, but out of respect for reality. Feelings change, standards don't. Acting when you feel nothing builds a rare form of resilience, the ability to continue without reward. Most people need feedback to stay engaged. They need signs of progress. They need reassurance. When those disappear, they slow down. But the work that matters most often feels unrewarding at first. The repetition, the maintenance, the preparation. These actions don't feel heroic. They feel invisible, and that's why they're effective. I've seen people quit at the edge of a breakthrough because they mistook emotional flatness for failure. They assumed something was wrong, when in fact they were just entering a phase where results lag behind effort. Relentless action keeps you moving through that phase, not quickly, steadily. It trains you to trust process over sensation. There is a quiet confidence that comes from acting without emotion. You stop identifying with your feelings. You stop letting them define your behavior. You become someone who acts first and evaluates later. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you stable. Stability is underestimated. People chase intensity because it feels alive. But intensity is unsustainable. Stability carries you through long stretches of uncertainty. Acting relentlessly also reveals truth. On days when you feel nothing, there is no emotional reward to hide behind. You either act or you don't. And that honesty builds integrity. Integrity is not about morality. It's about alignment. Alignment between intention and behavior. When that alignment becomes consistent, self-trust grows. You no longer wonder whether you'll follow through. You know you will. And that knowledge reduces anxiety. It removes pressure. You're no longer chasing progress, you're executing it. There's a calm strength in that. Relentless action doesn't mean ignoring rest. It means resting deliberately. You rest to recover, not to escape. You slow down strategically, not emotionally. This is how momentum becomes sustainable. When you act regardless of mood, effort becomes normalized. It stops feeling heavy. The work doesn't disappear, but resistance does. And that's when progress accelerates. Most people stop when they feel nothing. They interpret neutrality as a signal to pause. But neutrality is often a sign of adaptation. The mind has adjusted. The work is no longer shocking. That's not the time to stop. That's the time to continue. Because what feels ordinary now is what will separate you later. Act relentlessly, not because it feels powerful, but because it builds power quietly. In the absence of emotion, discipline reveals itself, and discipline, applied without drama, creates outcomes that don't depend on circumstance. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel driven. You just need to act again and again and again. That is how momentum is built. Not through moments of inspiration, but through days that feel like nothing. And when others stall in those moments, you move. That difference compounds. Relentless action is not aggressive. It is patient. And patience, paired with consistency, wins. Chapter 5. Stop explaining. Start executing. The more someone explains their intentions, the less likely they are to execute them. This isn't because explanation is wrong. It's because explanation often replaces action. When progress is slow, people talk. They justify, they clarify, they defend. And in doing so, they feel productive without actually moving forward. Execution doesn't need permission. Explanation does. That difference matters. Most people explain because they want to be understood. They want reassurance. They want agreement. But results don't require understanding. They require work. There is a quiet trap in over-explaining. It shifts focus away from responsibility and toward approval. You begin managing perception instead of performance. And perception is fragile. I once watched someone announce their plans repeatedly. They explained why timing wasn't right, why conditions were difficult, why progress was slower than expected. Everything they said made sense, and that was the problem. Reasonable explanations kept them comfortable. They softened accountability. As long as the story sounded logical, no change was required. Execution doesn't offer that comfort. When you execute, there's no story to hide behind. Either the work is done, or it isn't. That clarity is uncomfortable for people who rely on explanation to maintain self-image. Explaining creates the illusion of movement. Executing creates actual movement. One protects identity, the other builds it. There's also a deeper issue beneath constant explanation. It reveals uncertainty. When you're clear about your path, you don't need to convince anyone. You move. Explanation often shows up when commitment is incomplete. You explain because you're still negotiating, either with others or with yourself. Strong execution ends negotiation, not aggressively, quietly. You stop talking because there's nothing left to discuss. People sometimes confuse silence with avoidance. In reality, silence is often focus. The most effective people I've seen didn't announce progress. They didn't defend their pace. They didn't argue about direction. They worked, and when results appeared, explanation became irrelevant. Results simplify everything. They don't require context. They don't need justification. They don't ask to be understood. They speak. Most people fear being misunderstood more than they fear being ineffective. That fear drives unnecessary explanation. They would rather explain intentions than risk being judged for incomplete results. But execution always involves risk. You risk failing quietly. You risk progressing without recognition. You risk looking wrong before you look right. Explanation tries to avoid that discomfort. Execution accepts it. There's a moment when you realize explanation is slowing you down, not externally, but internally. Every time you explain, you reopen the decision. You revisit doubt. You invite feedback that isn't useful. Execution closes the loop. You decide once and act repeatedly. This doesn't mean you become uncommunicative. It means you become selective. You stop explaining things that don't need explanation. Your discipline, your standards, your priorities. These don't require consensus. They require consistency. When you stop explaining, the energy is reclaimed. Mental bandwidth returns to where it belongs, the work. You stop rehearsing conversations that never needed to happen. You stop defending choices that were already aligned. And that creates speed. quiet speed. There is power in being unreachable, not physically, but mentally. When you're no longer pulled into explaining yourself, your focus sharpens. You don't drift, you don't stall, you move forward, even if no one notices yet. People who execute don't argue about vision. They build it. They don't convince others of discipline. They demonstrate it. Over time, this creates a shift in how you're perceived. Not louder, stronger. People stop questioning what you're doing, not because they understand it, but because they see it working. Execution creates authority without demand. That authority is earned, not claimed. And there's also a personal shift that happens when explanation disappears. Self-trust increases. You no longer need to explain yourself to feel legitimate. Your actions validate you. This is where confidence stabilizes. Not emotional confidence, but behavioral confidence. You trust yourself because you've seen what you do consistently, not because you've talked about what you plan to do. Most people talk themselves into comfort. Execution pulls you into growth. The less you explain, the more time you spend building evidence, and evidence compounds. Stop explaining why it's hard. Stop explaining why timing is imperfect. Stop explaining why you're different now. None of that matters. What matters is whether the work is being done. Explanation delays reality. Execution confronts it. And the people who win are not the ones with the best explanations. They're the ones with the strongest follow-through. When you feel the urge to explain, pause. Ask yourself a simple question. Would this time be better spent executing? Most of the time, the answer is yes. Silence, paired with consistent action, creates a kind of momentum that explanation never will. You don't need to announce progress. You don't need to defend your process. You need to build, quietly, relentlessly, without negotiation. Because execution doesn't argue, it delivers. There is one more reason people explain instead of execute: fear of finality. Explanation keeps options open. It allows retreat. It gives you room to change direction without admitting hesitation. Execution removes that safety net. Once you act, the outcome becomes real, measurable, visible, and that exposure is uncomfortable. So people talk instead. They keep things theoretical. They stay in a space where nothing can truly fail, because nothing is truly attempted. But real progress only begins when excuses lose their usefulness. Execution forces you to confront reality as it is, not as you describe it. And reality doesn't negotiate. You either moved forward or you didn't. This is why execution builds character faster than explanation ever could. It hardens decision-making. It sharpens priorities. It trains you to stand behind your actions without needing validation. Over time, something important happens. You stop feeling the urge to explain yourself. Not because you don't care, but because you're no longer uncertain. Certainty doesn't come from thinking. It comes from repeated action, and when certainty is internal, explanation becomes unnecessary. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to justify your pace. You don't need to clarify your intentions. You're too busy executing. That's when momentum becomes undeniable, not because you said the right things, but because you did the right ones. Chapter 6. Stay calm in chaos. That's real power. Chaos doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, through pressure, urgency, noise, and reaction. And in those moments, most people lose control without realizing it. They react faster than they think. They speak before they decide. They move emotionally and justify it later. Calm disappears first. Power disappears with it. Staying calm is not about suppressing emotion. It's about not being ruled by it. There is a difference. People often mistake calmness for weakness. They associate power with intensity, urgency, and force. But intensity fades. Calm endures. The people who dominate under pressure are not the loudest. They are the most composed. Chaos tests something deeper than skill. It tests control. Not control over circumstances, but control over response. And you cannot choose what happens. You can always choose how you respond. That choice is where power lives. I've seen situations where everyone rushed to speak, to act, to prove something, and the person who waited, who paused just long enough to think clearly, ended up making the only decision that mattered, not because they were smarter, because they were calmer. Calm gives you access to perspective. Perspective gives you leverage. When emotions spike, vision narrows. You focus on the immediate threat, the loudest voice, the fastest solution. That's when mistakes happen. Staying calm widens the lens. You see options others miss. You notice patterns instead of symptoms. You respond instead of react. This doesn't mean you move slowly. It means you move deliberately. There is speed in calmness. Emotional reaction wastes energy. A calm response conserves it. That energy compounds. Most people exhaust themselves in chaos. They burn mental fuel reacting to everything. Calm people don't chase control. They embody it. They don't need to dominate the room. They influence it, and influence lasts longer than force. Staying calm also sends a signal to yourself and to others. To yourself, it reinforces trust. You prove that pressure doesn't break your standards. To others, it creates gravity. People listen to those who don't panic. Panic spreads fast. So does calm. One escalates chaos. The other stabilizes it. There is a reason leaders who endure are composed. They understand that emotion is contagious. When you lose control of yourself, you lose control of the situation. Calmness is not passive. It is active restraint. It requires awareness. It requires discipline, and it requires letting go of the need to immediately discharge emotion. Most people feel an urge to react because reaction offers relief. It releases tension, but relief is temporary. The consequences last longer. Calmness delays relief, but improves outcome. This is why calm feels difficult at first. It asks you to hold discomfort instead of escaping it. But that discomfort sharpens you. The ability to pause, to breathe, to observe before acting is a skill. And like all skills, it improves with repetition. Every time you choose calm over reaction, you strengthen control. Over time, something changes. Chaos no longer feels overwhelming. It becomes familiar. You don't crave it, but you're no longer threatened by it. This is where real power shows up. Not in moments of comfort, but in moments of instability. Calm people don't need perfect conditions. They adapt. They don't rush to fix everything. They prioritize. They don't absorb every emotion in the room. They filter. That filtering protects clarity, and clarity is rare under pressure. Most mistakes are not made because of lack of intelligence. They are made because of emotional overload. Staying calm reduces noise. It creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, choice exists. Choice is freedom. Without it, you're reactive. With it, you're deliberate. Calm also protects consistency. Emotional swings lead to inconsistent behavior. One day disciplined, the next day reckless. Calm stabilizes rhythm. It allows you to act according to standard, not mood. And standards are what carry you through long-term challenges. Chaos will show up again and again. In work, modern relationships, in decisions that matter. You don't eliminate chaos. You outgrow its influence. You stop letting it dictate your state. That is maturity. That is strength. The strongest people are not those who feel nothing. They feel, but they don't obey every feeling. They acknowledge emotion without surrendering to it. That balance takes practice, but once developed, it becomes an advantage few possess. While others rush, you wait. While others argue, you observe. While others react, you decide. This is not about control over others. It's about sovereignty over yourself. And sovereignty is the foundation of power. Staying calm in chaos doesn't make life easier. It makes you steadier. And steadiness outlasts intensity every time. When pressure rises, and it will, you won't need to search for control. You'll already have it, because you built it quietly, deliberately, long before chaos arrived. That's real power. Chapter 7. Commit longer than your doubt. Every meaningful pursuit reaches a phase where doubt becomes louder than progress. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something long enough for reality to test you. This is where most people stop. Not at the beginning, not when things are clearly difficult, but when effort continues and results remain quiet. Doubt thrives in silence. It appears when there's no feedback, when progress feels slower than expected, when the excitement that once fueled you fades. And unlike fear, doubt sounds reasonable. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It asks careful questions. Is this working? Shouldn't I be further by now? Is this really worth it? Those questions feel intelligent, but they're dangerous, because doubt doesn't need to be true to be convincing. It only needs to feel logical. Most people don't quit because they fail. They quit because they lose patience with uncertainty. They expect progress to be visible on their timeline. They expect effort to be rewarded quickly. They expect commitment to feel reassuring. But real commitment rarely does. Commitment feels heavy before it feels rewarding, lonely before it feels meaningful, pointless before it feels powerful. This is the phase no one prepares you for. The phase where nothing is wrong, but nothing is obvious either. You're showing up, you're doing the work, you're staying disciplined. And yet, the voice in your head starts asking whether you should slow down, adjust, or stop. This is not a sign to quit. It's a sign you're early. Doubt appears when the gap between effort and outcome stretches longer than your emotional tolerance. Most people interpret that gap as failure. It isn't. It's incubation. Growth happens quietly before it announces itself. Skills develop before they pay off. Strength builds before it's tested. Momentum forms before it's visible. But doubt doesn't care about process. It cares about comfort. And comfort demands reassurance. I've seen people walk away from something they were fully capable of. Not because it was too hard, but because they couldn't tolerate not knowing when it would work. They wanted certainty before commitment. But certainty only comes after sustained commitment. This creates a paradox. The thing you want, proof, only appears if you continue without it. Those who understand this stay. Those who don't leave early and call it realism. Doubt often disguises itself as wisdom. It tells you to be practical, to reassess, to avoid wasting time. But quitting early is the most expensive decision you can make. It wastes everything you've already invested. Time, energy, focus. And worst of all, it trains your mind to associate doubt with retreat. Once that pattern forms, it repeats. Every future challenge becomes shorter-lived. Every new commitment weaker. This is why committing longer than your doubt matters. Not forever, not blindly, just longer than the discomfort wants you to. Most people quit at the exact moment commitment starts to matter. They confuse emotional discomfort with strategic misalignment, but those are not the same. Discomfort is expected. Misalignment is rare. If you're still doing the work, you're still learning, still improving, even slowly, you are aligned. Doubt is simply testing how serious you are. I once watched someone stay consistent long after doubt had convinced everyone else to stop. No dramatic belief, no certainty, just quiet persistence. They didn't know when it would pay off. They didn't feel confident every day. They just kept going. Eventually, something shifted. Not suddenly, gradually. Opportunities appeared. Competence became visible. Momentum built. And what once looked questionable now looked inevitable. The difference wasn't intelligence, it wasn't talent, it was duration. They stayed long enough for doubt to exhaust itself. Doubt has limited energy. It fades when you don't feed it with reaction. The more you act despite doubt, the quieter it becomes. Eventually, it loses authority. You stop asking whether you should continue. You just do. This is where identity changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying. You become someone who follows through. That identity shift is irreversible. Once you've stayed through uncertainty long enough to see results, future doubt loses its grip. You've seen what patience can produce. You trust time differently. This doesn't mean you never adjust. It means you don't adjust emotionally. You don't make decisions at the peak of uncertainty. You wait until clarity arrives. And clarity arrives after consistency, not before. Most people want reassurance before commitment. Strong people accept uncertainty as part of commitment. They understand that doubt is not a verdict. It's a test of endurance. Commitment is not about feeling sure. It's about acting without certainty. This is why commitment is rare. It asks you to continue without guarantees, to invest without immediate return, to stand alone without validation. But that's also why commitment creates separation. While others stop, you stay. While others reassess endlessly, you move forward. That difference compounds. Over time, staying becomes your advantage. Not because you're stubborn, but because you understand the process. You don't rush results, you build capacity. And capacity determines how much success you can hold when it arrives. Commit longer than your doubt. Not because doubt is wrong, but because it's early. Give your effort time to mature. Give your discipline time to compound. Give your standards time to shape identity. And the moment you feel like quitting, not because you can't continue, but because you're tired of not seeing results, that's the moment commitment matters most. Stay. Not emotionally, not dramatically, practically. Do the next step, then the next, then the next. Doubt fades when action continues, and when doubt finally loses its voice, momentum takes its place. That's when progress becomes visible. That's when confidence stabilizes. That's when quitting stops being an option. Not because it's impossible, but because it no longer makes sense. Commit longer than your doubt. That decision separates those who almost make it from those who do. Chapter 8. Win anyway. At some point, you realize that waiting for ideal conditions is just another form of delay. You've prepared, you've disciplined yourself, you've stayed calm under pressure, you've committed longer than doubt wanted you to. And still, life doesn't cooperate. Things don't line up perfectly. Energy fluctuates. Circumstances shift. This is where the final decision is made. Not whether you'll succeed, but whether you'll move forward anyway. Winning is not about perfect execution. It's about refusal. Refusal to quit. Refusal to retreat into comfort. Refusal to let circumstances dictate identity. Most people believe winning happens when everything aligns. In reality, winning happens when alignment is missing, and action continues. This is the difference between those who make progress and those who stall indefinitely. The idea of winning anyway is not aggressive. It's grounded. It accepts reality as it is and removes negotiation. You stop asking whether today is the right day. You stop waiting for permission from mood, timing, or confidence. You act because acting is who you are now. This mindset removes drama from difficulty. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening?" you ask, "What's the next step?" That shift seems small. It's not. It turns obstacles into logistics, problems into processes. Winning anyway is not about overpowering everything in your path. It's about not being stopped by what's expected. Fatigue, resistance, uncertainty. These are not signs to stop. They're signs you're in motion. Most people pause when friction appears. They assume friction means something is wrong. But friction is inevitable when standards rise. Higher standards create tension with old habits, old environments, and old identities. Winning anyway means accepting that tension without dramatizing it. You don't complain. You don't rush to explain. You don't demand comfort. You continue. I've seen people succeed not because they were exceptional, but because they didn't give themselves an exit. They didn't burn bridges. They simply stopped building escape routes. No backup plans built on comfort, no emotional bargaining, just forward movement. That kind of commitment simplifies life. Decisions become binary. Either the work gets done or it doesn't. And when there's no acceptable alternative, action becomes natural. Winning anyway also means redefining success. Success is not absence of difficulty. It's consistency in the presence of it. You don't win by feeling strong every day. You win by staying reliable when strength fluctuates. That reliability becomes your edge. Others surge and stall. You move steadily. Over time, steadiness outperforms intensity. There's a calm confidence that comes from knowing you'll act regardless of outcome. You stop attaching your identity to short-term results. You stop riding emotional highs and lows. You become outcome independent, but process committed. That is freedom. Winning anyway also demands humility. You accept that you won't always be at your best, that some days will be inefficient, that mistakes will happen, and you don't let that stop you. Perfectionism kills momentum faster than failure ever could. Winning anyway means moving forward imperfectly rather than standing still, flawlessly. It means finishing what others abandoned because it didn't feel ideal. This is where separation becomes permanent. Most people stop when things stop feeling rewarding. They confuse challenge with incompatibility, but compatibility is built, not discovered. You become capable by staying longer than comfort allows. There's a moment, often unnoticed, where effort turns into identity. You no longer push yourself to act. You simply act. Not because you're forcing discipline, but because discipline has become familiar. That's when winning stops feeling like an event and starts feeling like a direction. You're no longer chasing victory. You're walking toward it. Winning anyway also requires silence. You don't announce every struggle, and you don't seek validation for perseverance. You understand that most battles are internal and must be won privately. Public applause is optional. Internal alignment is not. This is why many people fail after initial success. They win once, but don't know how to win without momentum. Winning anyway teaches you to operate without it, without excitement, without certainty, without external pressure. That ability makes you dangerous, in the best sense of the word. Because you don't depend on conditions. You create progress regardless of them. Life doesn't become easier, you become steadier, and steadiness compounds. Small actions repeated under imperfect conditions create resilience. Resilience creates durability. Durability creates dominance. Not loud dominance. Quiet dominance. The kind that doesn't seek attention but earns results. Winning anyway also means accepting responsibility without resentment. You stop blaming systems, people, or timing. Not because they're irrelevant, but because they're uncontrollable. You focus on what responds to effort, your actions, your standards, your consistency. That focus simplifies everything. You stop feeling trapped, you stop feeling delayed, you feel engaged with the process, engaged with growth, engaged with your own evolution, and that engagement sustains momentum. At this point, winning becomes inevitable, not because success is guaranteed, but because quitting no longer fits who you are. You don't need motivation. You don't need belief. You have standards, and standards don't care how you feel. They care what you do. Winning anyway is not a final burst of effort. Like it's a decision you make once and reinforce daily. A decision to move forward without negotiation, to act without drama, to stay when it would be easier to stop. That decision changes everything, because when you stop asking whether you'll win and start acting as if forward movement is non-negotiable, outcomes follow. Not instantly, not predictably, but inevitably. You don't win because you deserve it. You win because you stayed long enough, acted consistently enough, and refused to exit when conditions were imperfect. That's what winning anyway means. And once you live this way, you don't need to convince anyone. Your life becomes the proof. There is a quiet moment that comes after you decide to win anyway. It's not dramatic. No celebration, no surge of confidence, just a steady sense of direction. As you wake up knowing what needs to be done, you move without hesitation. You no longer ask whether the effort is worth it. That question disappears when commitment settles in. Winning anyway does something subtle but permanent. It removes internal conflict. You stop arguing with yourself, stop bargaining with circumstances, stop imagining exits. Your energy, once divided, becomes focused. And focus accelerates everything. At this stage, progress doesn't feel exciting, it feels inevitable. You're no longer chasing outcomes, you're maintaining standards. You're no longer reacting to obstacles, you're adjusting calmly. What once felt heavy now feels normal. That's how growth disguises itself, not as triumph, but as routine. This is where many people misunderstand success. They expect it to feel euphoric. In reality, it feels stable, in stable habits, stable decisions, stable identity. You don't need external confirmation anymore. You've seen what consistency produces. You trust the process because you've lived it. Winning anyway also teaches you restraint. You stop proving, you stop comparing, you stop rushing to arrive. You understand that speed without stability collapses. And stability, once built, carries you far beyond talent. At this point, setbacks lose their emotional weight. They become part of the path, not a verdict on it. You correct, you continue. That's it. No drama, no story, just forward movement. And that is the final shift. Winning is no longer something you chase, it's something you sustain, quietly, relentlessly, without negotiation. You've reached the end of this audiobook. Not the end of the work, but the end of the explanation. What you've heard is not a collection of ideas. It's a standard for how to think, how to act, how to continue when motivation fades and conditions remain imperfect. Think bigger, act relentlessly, win anyway. These are not slogans. They are principles that only work when lived quietly, daily, and without negotiation. You've learned that thinking big is not inspiration. It's responsibility. That growth requires letting go of versions of yourself that once felt safe. That discipline is built in private, not announced in public. That real progress happens when emotion disappears and action remains. That explanation weakens momentum while execution strengthens it. That calm under pressure is a form of power few ever develop. That doubt is not a signal to stop, but a test of duration. And finally, that winning is not about perfect conditions, but about refusing to exit. None of this is easy, but it is simple, and simplicity, applied consistently, changes lives. If you're honest with yourself, you already knew most of what was said here. The problem was never knowledge. It was consistency. It was comfort. It was the habit of negotiating with yourself when things became uncomfortable, quiet, or slow. This audiobook was designed to remove that negotiation, not by force, but by clarity. Because when standards are clear, decisions become easier. You stop asking what you feel like doing. You start asking what needs to be done. That shift marks the difference between people who drift and people who build. From this point forward, nothing magical needs to happen. No surge of confidence, no dramatic transformation, just one thing. Follow through. Take what resonated most and apply it immediately. Not perfectly, not emotionally, practically. Wake up tomorrow and do one thing you've been avoiding. Not because it feels powerful, but because it aligns with the standard you've chosen. Then do it again the next day, and the day after that. Momentum is not created through intensity. It's created through reliability. There will still be days when you feel unsure. Days when progress feels invisible. Days when doubt whispers that this effort isn't worth it. Those days are not a problem. They are the proving ground. Stay, not dramatically, not angrily, calmly. Do the work. Keep the standard. Move forward anyway. And this is how discipline becomes identity. And once it does, life changes in subtle but permanent ways. Decisions become clearer. Confidence stabilizes. Pressure loses its grip. You no longer chase control, you carry it. Remember this, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. So guard them carefully. Protect your routines. Protect your focus. Protect the quiet progress no one sees yet. Because the world doesn't reward intention. It rewards consistency. If this audiobook helped you recalibrate your thinking, even slightly, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with one person you know who's struggling quietly, doubting themselves, or stuck between potential and action. Not to motivate them, but to remind them of what's possible when standards replace excuses. And if you return to this audiobook again in the future, listen with fresh ears. Not to feel inspired, but to realign. Because discipline drifts without reinforcement. Standards soften without reminder. Come back when you need clarity, when you need steadiness, when you need to remember that progress doesn't require perfection, only persistence. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying to the end. Now close this video and do the work. Quietly, relentlessly, without negotiation. That's how this story continues.